Hello skater boys and cheetah girls, Aaron here, back with another video. Xilonen has been running laps around every other support since her first released beta kit. Basically nothing has changed since then, as she's still the best support in the game and probably still will be on launch. But what makes her so broken? What do you need to get the most out of her? Who does she pair best with? Before I answer those questions and more, I just have to say that if you do like my content, why not take a bite out of that Mousse de Maracuja flavored subscribe button down below. Also note that I will be focusing mostly on her supportive capabilities in this guide. However, I will mention her main DPS capabilities when they become relevant, but that is not what this guide focuses on. But with that done, let's skate our way right into Xilonen's overview. Xilonen is a Geo support that focuses on supplying versatile damage buffs and strong single target healing. The former is done mostly through her skill, which can get a bit complicated. Xilonen will have resource samplers that record if ally party members are of the Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and Cryo elements. Geo, Animo, and Dendro allies will all be considered Geo to these source samplers. Xilonen will then be considered in one of two stances depending on how many Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and Cryo source samplers she has. If there are two or more of these source samplers, Xilonen will be considered in her support stance. Otherwise, she will be in her DPS stance. In both stances, when her skill is pressed, she will deal Geo damage based on her defense, generate 4 Geo particles when she hits an enemy, and she will enter the Night Soul state while consuming Night Soul points over time. Her Night Soul state will end after 9 seconds when her Night Soul points are completely depleted or when they're capped, or until she is swapped off field, at which point it will go on a cooldown for 7 seconds. While in the Night Soul state, she will reduce nearby enemy Geo resistances by 36% at talent level 10. Additionally, while in the Night Soul state, Xilonen loses access to her charged attacks. To compensate, she gains a Geo infusion on her normal and plunging attacks, which will now scale based off of her defense, plus a movement speed and climbing speed bonus. Her Ascension 4 passive grants her a 20% defense bonus for 15 seconds after any party member triggers Night Soul Burst, no matter her stance. Now that we have the general aspects of her kit sorted out, it's time to mention what the differences between each of her stances are. While in her DPS stance, her Elemental Burst will deal 3 instances of Geo damage in an AoE, scaling based on her defense. Additionally, her Ascension 1 passive grants her a 30% damage bonus to her normal and plunging attacks. While in her support stance, Xilonen's Elemental Burst will deal 1 instance of AoE damage, scaling based on her defense. Afterward, she heals the current active party member once per 1.5 seconds, or 12 seconds, or 8 times, by an amount also based on her defense. Additionally, her Ascension 1 passive will enable her normal or plunging attacks to increase her Night Soul point amount, which caps after 2 normal or plunging attacks. When her Night Soul points are capped out, she will forcefully re-trigger Night Soul Burst on a 14-second cooldown, and she will activate the source samplers she currently has. When her source samplers are activated, she will reduce nearby enemies' resistances to the elements her source samplers have recorded by 36% at talent level 10 for 15 seconds. To sum up the main differences between her main DPS and support stance, Xilonen's main DPS stance can only occur if 3 or more Geo, Dendro, or Animo units are on the team, including Xilonen. At that point, her kit becomes damage-focused, scaling on her defense, and she will shred Geo resistances while on field. Xilonen's support stance will only activate if 2 or more Hydro, Pyro, Electro, and Cryo units are on the team. At that point, she can heal the on-field party members, scaling on her defense, while reducing Geo, Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and Cryo resistances of enemies, all while off-field. For Xilonen's talent priority, you are looking to max out her elemental skill first, because the level for elemental skill increases the resistance shred she provides the team by 3% per level. She needs this leveled and capped at the least, since this is the most important buff she provides. Her burst can be leveled next in order to increase her total healing, but it doesn't need to be leveled too high, since her healing can only be so effective. You can aim for level 6 and stop there, or keep going. Her normal attacks do not need to be leveled unless you're looking to use her as a main DPS, which doesn't even even perform too well. Even if you are using her as a main DPS, her burst will be dealing a large majority of her damage, so you'd want to nearly cap that before you even think about leveling her normal attacks. If you are determined to make her a main DPS, then you can level up her normal attacks, but if you want to use her for what she was made to do, then completely ignore them. Xilonen's main combo is a bit different to other supports, but it is similar to supports with a shorter uptime. First, you want to apply the element of the element who will not have aura priority in your team. This will usually be the main DPS, like Hu Tao with double hydro, but there are some situations where it could be from the off-field damage dealers, like with Fischl or Beidou in Quicken teams. After the element is applied, swap to Xilonen and use her skill to crystallize the element for them to gain a 40% damage bonus from the scroll artifact set. Then go through the other two off-field units in the party and back into her to perform her main combo. This combo consists of using her skill to rush forward and then using 2 normal attacks in order to activate her Res Shred passive, then into her elemental burst. After that, swap into your main DPS to do their combo and then repeat. If using her as a main DPS, then you want to use her skill first and then burst into her normal attack combo or plunge attacks if using Jian Yun. But now with her base kit done, let's move on to mentioning how good vertically investing into Xilonen's constellations is. Xilonen's first constellation decreases her Night Soul point and phlogiston consumption in her Night Soul's blessing state by 30%. Additionally, her Night Soul point time limit is extended by 45%. On top of that, when Xilonen's source samples are active, she will also increase nearby active characters' interruption resistance by 50%. This constellation extends Xilonen's on-field duration from 9 to 13 seconds at max, though it will realistically increase her main DPS window by only about 1 to 2 seconds. This does almost nothing for her at all constellation levels other than 6. If not at C6, the only benefit this constellation grants is the 50% interruption resistance to on-field party members, which is good for a healer, but nothing noteworthy, making it one of the worst constellations in the game. Xilonen's second constellation causes her Geo source sample to constantly remain active. Additionally, when her source samples activate, all nearby party members will gain effects corresponding to the active source sample that matches their elemental type. Geo party members gain a 50% Geo damage bonus, Pyro party members gain 45% attack, Hydro party members gain 45% HP, Cryo party members gain 60% crit damage, and Electro party members generate 25 energy and their burst cooldown is reduced by 6 seconds. These are each incredibly powerful buffs for each element to use. However, they are not made the same. Buffs like 50% Geo damage can be used by everyone in the Geo roster, as can 60% crit damage bonus that the Cryo units get. But bonuses like the 45% attack and HP buff to Pyro and Hydro units, and the burst buff for Electro are only offensively beneficial on certain units. Units like Hu Tao, Dea, Tartaglia, Ayato, Jingshou, Kuqing, and Fischl gain little to no benefit from this constellation. On the other side of things, some units can gain a ridiculously large amount of damage from this buff, like Fiorina, who can get up to a 23% damage increase. This constellation can be insanely strong or potentially useless. For comparison's sake, Xilonen's signature sword will always end up increasing the team's damage with a strong and versatile elemental damage bonus buff. To keep the yapping to a minimum, this means that Xilonen's sword will be much more beneficial to more teams than Xilonen's C2, but her C2 has higher highs than her sword. Generally, Peak Patrol surpasses her C2 when buffing Pyro units that have a large attack stat, or when they don't scale well with attack, non-HP scaling Hydro characters, Animo characters, Dendro characters, and Electro characters. Xilonen's C2 excels over her signature sword at buffing physical characters, Geo characters, Cryo characters, and HP scaling Hydro characters, while both are about equal when buffing Pyro characters that are lacking a large attack stat. In any case, both of these vertical investment options would lead to between an 8 to 20% team-wide damage increase depending on the team. This is one of the largest team-wide damage boosts that Genshin has to offer, making either option one of the best vertical investment upgrades currently in the game. Xilonen's third constellation increases her skill level by 3. This would increase the damage of her skill's rush, but that does very little. The main benefit is the extra 9% resistance shred it offers. This makes Xilonen the best source of resistance shred for 5 elements in the game. However, this extra resistance shred ends up doing very little since its effectiveness is halved, leading to a rather small yet still meaningful team damage bonus. Xilonen's C4 turns her into a mini Yunjin as she grants a flat damage buff to normal charge charged and plunging attacks, scaling equal to a Yunjin with a talent level 12 burst. However, each party member does not have 30 stacks to use, and instead they only have 6 each. Yeah, this is a pretty negligible damage increase to any main DPS. Instead, it serves mostly as another way to buffer C6 when we get there. Xilonen's 5th constellation increases the level of her burst by 3. This increases her healing by a strong amount, though it's not needed since she was practically full healing before. On top of that, it also increases her damage, but again, it leads to no meaningful increase. While these things do straight up increase her potency as a character, it's not by much, or it's not needed, making this her 2nd worst constellation. And finally, we have her capstone constellation. Once per 15 seconds, upon entering the Night Soul state, the next time Xilonen uses a sprint, leap, normal attack, or plunging attack, she will gain imperishable Night's Blessing for 5 seconds. In this state, Xilonen's Night Soul max duration will be paused, her Night Soul points, phlogiston, and stamina will not deplete, she will not be removed from her Night Soul state upon reaching max Night Soul points, and her normal and plunging attacks will deal increased damage based on 300% of her defense. This does 2 major things for her. For one, it actually makes her a main DPS with a normal on-field window and quite an incredible DPS too. And 2, it turns her into a team-wide healer, increasing her potency with Furina. The team-wide healing aspect is also always activated no matter the team. This means that she can be used as a full-on support in mono-geo teams. This constellation also massively amplifies her role as a healer since she now has a way to massively heal the on-field character and team at the same time. Because this new healing is also tied to her skill, you no longer need to worry about activating her burst every rotation to heal, rendering energy recharge even more lackluster than it was previously. However, this does come at the detriment that if you do want to use her burst, you need to build more into energy recharge because her skill only goes on cooldown after her Night Soul duration ends, granting her a new skill cooldown of about 10 to 12 seconds. This means that you will have to rely much more on her C6's healing over that of her bursts, which is an odd little give and take. Overall, Xilonen's constellations are hit or miss. Xilonen has an overpowered constellation in her C2, but she also has one of the most underwhelming constellations in the game in her C1. Unfortunately, there's little reason to go for anything other than her C2 except for specific niche cases, which makes recommending constellations rather awkward from my end, especially since her C2 costs over 2 times the wishes than her signature sword does. With that in mind, I'd recommend all of those that wish to vertically invest into Xilonen to invest into her signature weapon first and foremost, as it grants the largest and most consistent damage increase for not only her, but also to her team. They recently made weapons much easier to obtain too, so there's little reason not to get potentially the new best weapon in the game. After that, go for C1 and then into C2, since it also grants some insane damage bonuses for many characters. Investing in other units past this point is 100% the way to go, but if you are sold on Xilonen, go for her C3 for the extra resistance shredding to the team, then into her C4 for the extra flat damage buffing. This is where the path diverges, since if you want her to excel more in the support role, then go for weapon refinements up to 5. But if you are looking to use her as a main DPS, if you're looking to use her in specifically mono-geo teams, or if you're looking for more comfort alongside Furina, then go for her C5 and C6 for the unconditional on-field high damage window plus team-wide healing. Now with vertical investment all over with, let's move on to what artifacts are most worth investing into. Xilonen has 2 artifact sets that she can use, and both are superior in their own way. Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City is the set that she pairs best with when used for her main supportive function, as it will grant 12 energy back to her over a rotation while also buffing the team's elemental damage by 40%. This is an insane damage buff that she can grant the team, and it comes at the cost of literally nothing. Instead, it ends up reducing her energy costs by quite a significant amount, enabling her to run less energy recharge than most other supports. This will be her signature artifact set for most situations, including situations where she's used as a DPS, since the 40% damage bonus to both her and her elemental supports would usually outweigh or equal the damage increase she would get from the Obsidian Codex. Speaking of, the Obsidian Codex is the other set she would want to use as a main DPS. This set grants her a large 20% damage bonus while she's in the Night Soul state, and when she consumes Night Soul points, her crit rate increases by 40%. This is her best in slot set for personal damage, but it can come at the cost of team damage if she's being paired with a strong off-field DPS of a different element. So instead, it's best used for when she's used purely in mono-geo teams. For Xilonen's main stats, the most versatile option to go with as a support is an energy sands with a defense goblet and a healing bonus circlet. However, you can swap out the sands for a defense one if using an energy recharge weapon, especially Favonia's sword. This can also be done if using her as a main DPS, as this will be more beneficial to the team's damage. If using her in this way, you would also want to swap the defense goblet or geo damage percent one and the healing bonus circlet for a crit circlet, which can also be done if using her as a support with the Favonius sword. The circlet can also be swapped out for defense percent one if you don't have the recommended ones, but the others will usually end up being better for her. For substats, Xilonen has many different energy requirements that she can reach before anything else. 110 energy recharge is her lowest possible as long as she uses 2 elemental skills per rotation. If not done, then this number can shoot up to 220% depending on the team. While this isn't impossible to achieve since Xilonen does not have demanding stat requirements, it is still pretty huge. If you don't know what to go for, when in doubt, energy recharge Sands. After that, focus on getting her defense to a minimum of 2600 defense. If using her signature sword, a new minimum of 3000 defense is required in order for her to get the maximum bonus of her passive. Finally, focus on crit. A 1:2 ratio is best used as a main DPS. When built as a support, which is her main role, you'd want 33% crit rate at the minimum, but only if using Favonius sword. Otherwise, you can ignore the stat. Whether she acts as a DPS or pure support, this is the funky part about Xilonen, as she has better weapon options depending on how you want to use her. Xilonen's best sword is her signature Peak Patrol Song. This monster of a sword grants a Xilonen a ridiculous amount of defense percent for her to scale with, while also offering the team a large 36% damage buff to all sources of damage other than physical. This sword ends up allowing Xilonen to buff the damage of Geo, Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and Cryo units by 76%, while also allowing her to buff the damage of Animo and Dendro units by 36%. This weapon's nearly unconditional damage bonus to the entire team will usually lead to a 15% team damage increase or higher if built into, or a 6% team damage increase at the minimum if not. This weapon is so ridiculously strong for Xilonen and many other characters that I recommend everyone pick it up if you would like to increase the overall power of your teams. It's just that good. If you don't have this broken stat stick, then Favonius sword is a good substitute until then, since it offers the team a large energy requirement reduction while also allowing Xilonen to take up slightly less on-field time. Xilonen also has the option to activate the passive effect twice per rotation to drastically reduce the energy requirements for her teammates. This is her next best go-to support weapon since her personal damage has little relevance to the team's overall damage output. Instead of buffing Xilonen's own damage, it offers a team-wide reduction in energy recharge stats that the DPS units that she's supporting can now put into better stats like crit, leading to a higher team damage output than any other weapon can muster other than her signature. Boot of Ez Pitzel is a great free-to-play alternative though, as it will grant her the most defense of any 4-star sword. This grants her healing on par with her signature weapon and also one of the highest damage potentials of any sword in the game. This will be her base weapon, and if you don't have anything else, get this on her as soon as possible because very little can top it. Now, this is normally where I would go over synergies and team comps that the character I'm covering has, but Xilonen is so versatile that I think it would honestly be better to mention all the main DPS units she can be paired with. So I'll be going in order of release, but with 1.0 characters, it will be alphabetical. Diluc is a yes. Xilonen excels at buffing both him and his teammates reliably and basically unconditionally. Keqing is yes. Xilonen can buff both her and Fischl from off-field while acting as a support, but she will not be able to buff the Dendro applicator. Ningguang is a yes. Xilonen can mega buff Ningguang's damage output while acting as her defensive support. Noelle, kind of. Noelle does the same defensive job that Xilonen does while also being a main DPS, so she gains really no benefit from Xilonen. However, Xilonen has such strong buffs that she would still be one of Noelle's best buffing supports. Razor is a no. Razor is either transformative reaction focused DPS or physical DPS, which Xilonen cannot buff. Lee is a yes, mainly for the same reason as Diluc. Tartaglia is a yes. She works in all of Tartaglia's best teams as one of his best in slot defensive supports. Xinyan is a yes and a no. Xinyan is both a physical and pyro DPS, but Xilonen can only buff the pyro DPS aspect. So if using her as a pyro DPS, then yes. But if using her as a physical DPS, then no. Not until Xilonen's at C2. Ganyu is a yes. Both in freeze and melt teams, Xilonen will prove to be an incredibly powerful defensive support for Ganyu. Xiao is a no. Xilonen cannot increase the damage of Animo without her signature sword. Chao is a yes, for the same reason as Diluc. She even ends up being on par to better than Xianyun in her plunge attack focus comps. Yanfei is a yes for the same reason as Diluc, just like with Lee. Eula is a no since she mainly deals physical damage, which Xilonen cannot buff without her C2. Ayaka is a yes. Xilonen offers exceptional buffs to cryo-focus teams and freeze teams, which Ayaka excels in. Lumia is a yes, for the same reasons as Diluc, though it may be a bit uncomfortable to play with without Xingqiu. Aloy is a yes for both her main DPS and burst DPS playstyles. Dragon Shogun is a yes. Xilonen will excel excel at buffing Raiden as a driver support, mono element main carry, or an aggravate DPS. On top of that, Raiden will massively reduce Xilonen's energy requirements, which is very nice. Itto is a yes, but not in mono Geo. Xilonen offers such an insane damage buff to Itto that she would end up being a side grade if you could pair Itto along with Bennett and Fiorina. Otherwise, it's not worth it. Miko is a yes in both aggravate and quick bloom teams, as Xilonen can buff all units other than the Dendro one. Ayato is a yes in all of his comps except the transformative reaction focused ones he got from Dendro. Heizo is a no. She cannot buff his damage, and Heizo does not mesh well with the same comps that Xilonen wants to be a part of. Tignari is a no. She cannot buff Tignari's and his allies' Dendro damage unless she has her signature weapon. Sino is a yes. She works well in both of his aggravate and quick bloom comps, similarly to Miko. Wanderer is a no. Xilonen cannot buff Wanderer without her signature weapon, though she can buff his off-field Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and Cryo allies. Alhaitham is a no. Xilonen cannot buff Alhaitham, and she does not synergize well with his best off-field units in order to work in the team. Aya is a yes for the same reasons as Diluc, though Xilonen ends up being her best in slot defensive support due to her desire for multiple stats. Ave is a no. Bloom teams are just no bueno, and the same goes for Nilo. Linny is a yes. Xilonen enables incredibly high damage for main DPS in single element focus teams, which Linny excels at. Fermine is a no. Without her C2, Xilonen can do nothing for Fermine, though she can buff his teammates, which is pretty nice. Neuvillette is a yes. Xilonen enables some of the highest damaging single element focus teams, and Neuvillette has very few great buffing supports other than her. This allows Xilonen to drastically increase Neuvillette's mono hydro team's DPS. Riesli is a yes. She works as a very valuable asset toward buffing his damage and can work incredibly well in Melt, Freeze, Bain-Marie, all the other teams that you would want to use Riesli in. Navia is a yes. She enables the new highest damaging teams for Navia due to her ability to buff Navia and her elemental applicator easily. Coming is a yes for the same reasons as Diluc. Arlecchino is a yes, though she will not provide Arlecchino any comfort like other defensive supports who can buff attack to increase Arlecchino's resistances or mitigate Arlecchino's damage taken. Laurent is a yes for the same reasons as Sino and Miko. Nethos is a yes when he's used as an aggravate damage dealer. Mualani is a yes, as Xilonen can massively buff Mualani's damage potential without applying any additional elements, making her Mualani's best in slot support. Inich is a no, mainly because Xilonen cannot buff Dendro damage without her signature sword. At the current moment, Xilonen works in almost 75% of all teams in the game as their best in slot or second best in slot defensive support. The only units she does not pair well with are those that deal Dendro, physical, and animo damage, but even then, those units can sometimes still have her as a support if they're being supported by units that she can buff. Units like Kinich, Wanderer, and Fremine can still use Xilonen as their defensive support because of her ability to massively boost the damage of the off-fielders they love to use. The only comps she should 100% be swapped out for someone else is when the team focuses most of their damage on one of those elemental types she cannot buff. Zhao, Tignari, Alhaitham, and Kave are examples of these units. Now, to end off the video, it's time to mention Xilonen's rating. In terms of damage potential, Xilonen's is incredibly low as both an on-field and off-field unit. At her best, she could potentially reach a 4 given the absolute perfect scenario and with her signature peak patrol song, but in most situations, as both an on and off-field unit, she'd reach a 1.5 out of 5 on my damage rating scale. In terms of application, she's Geo, so 0. But that ends her lackluster components, as the rest of her kit is incredibly goated. For one, her offensive buffing potential is some of the highest in the game. She offers a large and versatile % damage bonus, plus resistance shredding to the point that she could pretty easily enable certain teams to reach new damage ceilings, earning her a 5 out of 5. Her battery potential is also quite good, since she lacks a lot of energy recharge in the first place. This means that she could funnel energy into her main DPS with almost no downside. She can also use her skill twice per rotation for even more energy gains, and she can even equip Favonia's sword while doing that too, giving her one of the largest geo battery potentials in the game. All of these benefits earn her a pretty strong 3.5 out of 5 for battery potential. For defensive utility, all she has is a single target heal. While this heal is strong, it is not enough to push her above other characters who can restore the entire team's HP, reduce the damage the team takes, and grant interruption resistance to on-field units. While this does earn her a 2 out of 5, it doesn't mean that it's not good defensive utility. It's just not the best in the game. In terms of versatility and flexibility, she can do a lot. She can act in all comps other than Spread, Physical, Animo, Dendro, and Virgin focus ones, as well as comps that require a unit like Nilo or Chevreuse, who shut out specific elements. On top of that, she is currently the best defensive support in comps that want to focus on one element's damage. Additionally, she can act as a defensive and offensive support unit as well as a main DPS, making her one of the most flexible units in the game. All of this earns her a very strong 5 out of 5 for flexibility and versatility. Overall, Xilonen is an incredibly strong defensive support support. She offers insane damage increases to 5 elements with very few restrictions, while also acting as the tank for the team. Xilonen is an incredibly powerful unit, earning her a 3 out of 5 for an overall rating, which is very high for a defensive character. This is mainly because of her ridiculous team-wide damage boosting capabilities, as hers are on par with both Kazuha and Furina's. The fact that it's purely just passive is one of the best parts, since many other units have some sort of requirement of team comp, reaction triggering, or an on-field DPS that uses normal attacks. Xilonen is currently the best defensive support in the game, to the point that if you are looking for a 5-star healer, Xilonen should be your go-to. But that's all I have to say on Xilonen. Now I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Xilonen? Do you plan to pull her? What teams do you plan to use her in? Tell me how you plan to use Xilonen down below. But with that done, I will get out of your hair. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye!